Greetings again to the fifth class, the 5.2, I guess, the fifth and a half class, I guess, of the Georgia School of Preaching um, and Biblical Studies on the book of Psalms. I've already recorded one lesson for us on this. It's a 2-hour class, and so the first hour was recorded earlier, and now I'm recording this hour. So let's just get started so we can try to get this done within the allotted time frame. We're going to look at Psalm 55. Psalm 55, if you will, open your Bibles there to Psalm 55. Probably one of the saddest Psalms written by David. If it was written by David, I believe it was. I believe there's plenty of evidence to indicate that it was the subject matter. And there are some dissenting voices as concerns who wrote the Psalm, but for the most part, it's generally agreed that David wrote the Psalm, wrote this particular Psalm, and it's written according to those who believe it was David. We'll just leave all that out and say that it's written by David, and you can give evidence to the contrary. Good for you. It was written in response to his being betrayed, I think, by both his son and his friend, his son Absalom, which David doesn't use that name Absalom a lot. It seems to me, if you watch the record, both in the Psalms and in the when David's speaking, he doesn't call him by his name very often at all. It's kind of an interesting thing. At any rate, by Absalom, his son, and his friend Ahithophel. The psalm divides itself into 3 almost equal parts. David's anguish is given to us in verses 1 through 8. David's anger is demonstrated in verses 9 through 15. And then David anticipates God's rescue in verses or salvation and also punishment upon the wicked in verses 16 through 23. And I got that outline from James Smith in his wisdom literature and Psalms. The story behind the Psalm can be found in 2 Samuel 15 through 17. Absalom, David's son, had stolen and was stealing the hearts of the people by trickery, by deceit, by flattering words. His intent was to usurp the throne. David made it easy for him. David wasn't going to the place of judgment. David was to be the judge of the people. He was their king. He was to be the judge of the people, but he wasn't doing the job. And as a result, people were, looking for leadership. And Absalom was, very easily stepped into the place that was vacated by David. David was in a kind of a lull in his leadership at this point for various reasons, but it all has to go back, I think, to his sin with Bathsheba and the consequences that were coming from that sin. David may have repented, but David was still in a lot of difficulties because of his sin. So Absalom was usurping the throne. He was in the process of usurping the throne, and David made it far too easy for him to do that. It was no small rebellion either. The end result was that some 400 or 40,000 Israelites lost their lives in this event. Ahithophel, he was a counselor and a friend to David. We'll talk about that more later as we get into the psalm. He betrayed David by secretly going over to Absalom. Some suggest that David actually knew that this was the case, but that's more something that you'd have to be there to know that. But he was a deep or a very at least in David's estimation. I don't know how Ahithophel was, whether it was Ahithophel deceitful throughout the whole time, I don't know. But as far as David's estimation of Ahithophel, this was a very close friend of David, an intimate relationship with David. How would you feel if the person that you chose as a confidant, a friend, a counselor, a person that you talked with about God and about theology and about things of God, and he betrayed you. He betrayed your confidences. You talked to him about questions that you might have had, and he took those questions and he betrayed you with it. How would you feel if he had done this to your worst enemy? Well, that's how David feels. And how would you feel if your worst enemy were your own son? I think this is a grief beyond grief. This is a grief that maybe only the heart of a parent who has lost a child in rebellion can know. I think it's a grief that God knows, because God, other than Jesus Christ, has never had a faithful child who did not rebel against him. We see the grief of God there in Genesis chapter 6. I think it's beyond human words. The human words we have are the best that God could give us to describe the grief in his heart. It's as if someone had died. But not only someone's, millions and millions of someones had died. Millions whom he loved. Millions for whom he would give his only begotten Son for their life. They had become so evil that they could only think evil. They had no knowledge of God, no desire of knowledge for God. They could only think evil thoughts. And it grieved God in his heart. And those words, grieved God in his heart. I don't, if we could hear them from God's heart, we would hear something stronger than that. Even as strong as that is, we would hear something stronger than that. And it's that kind of grief with which David writes here. And this psalm may escape some people who don't understand or don't know. And I'm proud for you if you don't know it. Who don't know the grief of a child who's betrayed or gone away from one's faith, gone away from the values and teachings that you have tried to instill, that you have in your own heart. There's a parallel here to Jesus and Judas, who betrayed Jesus, and even Jesus, the friends of Jesus today who betrayed him. I don't think we need to limit it to Judas and Ahithophel. There are those today, even ourselves at times, who have betrayed Jesus, who have turned our back on him, who have gone over to the enemy. And it's always, when I find friends, acquaintances through online sources or person-to-person relationships, and see that someone who's been in the faith for a long time, take Demas for example, but someone who's been in the faith for a long time, who not only gives up the faith but attacks the faith, who degenerates the faith, who becomes the enemy of the faith. It's bad for them that they turn away, that they go chasing after the world. But what's worse is when they become attackers of the faith. There are multiple examples in history of men who have done just that. And one of the great examples, of course, would be Darwin. He was never a part of the true faith, as far as I can understand. He was confused. He and his father were confused about certain religious issues, but his father was someone who at least tried to love God, and Darwin became one who was a denier of that very being. Can you imagine his father's heart? Well, that's David. That's what he's feeling here, and that's how I think we can perceive Jesus' feelings when he is betrayed, whether it be by Judas of his time or people of our own day and time. So while these are David's words about David's story, I want us to try to keep, as we go through the study of the psalm, try to keep Jesus and Judas in our mind as we read these words, but remember also that these are timeless songs. They have an immediate history where David was. They have that history was influencing the writing of the psalm, but they're also given to us. God intended for these songs to be passed down for these 3,000 to 4,000 years to us. God intended for us to read Psalm 55 today. And so it's not just a history lesson, but it's a means of teaching, a means of encouraging, a means of warning and guiding us today. So let's sing this psalm noting both its history and its prophecy. I know we're not going to sing tonight. Psalm 55. Give ear to my prayer, O God. Do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan noisily. But David opens this song with a prayer. Maybe it's a prayer in and of itself. But he opens this song with prayer asking God not to hide himself. Don't look away from my troubles. Remember the priest and the Levite of the story of the Good Samaritan? They basically essentially looked away. They saw the trouble, but they looked away from the trouble. They didn't want to get their hands dirty in their troubles. They didn't want to extend mercy to the man who was in need. And David is saying, don't do that to me, God. Hear my prayer. Attend to my needs. Don't look away. Extend mercy to me. Have you ever, looking at the words of the psalm here, have you ever been restless while waiting for God to answer your prayer? That word restless there, it means to tramp about, to ramble. What picture do you see in your mind when you read to tramp about or to ramble? Well, as was David, he was pacing the floor, waiting for God's answer, anticipating God's answer. The word translated complaint there in the text is the same word that's translated cry or cry out in many other texts in the Bible. For example, it's used to describe what the Hebrew slaves did in Egypt. They cried out unto God. I have heard their cry. Sayak is the word. I have heard their cry. And it's the same word that God uses to warn the Jews that if you cause the poor, the widow, the fatherless to cry out because of your oppression of them, I will hear their cry and I will oppress you. I'll bring judgment upon you. Jesus in prophecy, in David in real time with the psalm anyway, they cried out to God because of severe oppression. This is no mere walking the second mile that Jesus talks about in the book of Matthew 5. This is no mere turning of the other cheek or slapping of the cheek and then turning one. This is the breaking of a heart. You know, if you read the medical analysis of the crucifixion of Jesus, the doctors will tell you that Jesus died of a broken heart. The blood and the water that came forth physically and metaphorically, the indication is that Jesus died of a broken heart. This is the anguish that Jesus was experiencing there in the garden. He knew what was coming, or at least he understood to a degree what was coming. It's anguish that caused the Son of God to cry out there in that garden prayer. The phrase moan noisily, it means to make an uproar, to agitate greatly. So David is crying out loud, not just crying, but crying out loud. He's in anguish. So is Jesus over this oppression through which they're going. Can you imagine Jesus described as being restless in my complaint and moaning noisily? Jesus taught us, it's a little difficulty for me, he taught us to be anxious over nothing. So Jesus was not anxious over nothing. He did not allow anxiety to overcome him, but at the same time, he was so in anguish that he's on his face, stressed to the degree that he's bleeding through his pores. That blood, sweat, as it were, blood, it's a medical condition induced by stress. It's very rare because not many people go through that much stress that Jesus was going through, but it is a medical condition on note or on record. Jesus was so stressed by the upcoming events that he's in anguish to the degree that he's sweating blood. How would you describe his demeanor the last few hours of his life? How would you describe his demeanor there in the garden of prayer? He goes to God in prayer 3 times in a matter of a few moments, terribly burdened. And know that the burden included the thought of bearing the sin of humanity. He was going to go to the cross. He was going to bear, because he was going to take the consequence of the sin of all humanity, past, present, and future, upon himself. I will die the death that was spoken of in Genesis chapter 3, Genesis chapter 2. I will die that death for them. So that in and of itself, Jesus being spiritually separated from God for ever how long it was, the 3 days in the tomb, ever how long it was. And I don't know, it doesn't matter. Jesus had never been, he'd always been one with the Father. And for this moment in time, or for this 3-day period, however long it was, he was going to be separated from God. God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you turned your back on me? God had turned his back on Jesus, and Jesus felt it. Even before it happened, he felt it's coming. And he's crying out to God in the garden, but it's not just the spiritual effects. Jesus was a man. And he felt the physical burden that was going to be on him over the next few hours. One of those physical burdens was that his friends would betray him. Judas, not just Judas, but Judas. All of them betrayed him. All of them ran away. Judas' situation being most obvious. Jesus was in the flesh. He was God in the flesh, and therefore he felt pain, emotional pain. He felt physical pain. He felt spiritual pain. So as he's in the garden, just hours, moments before his death began to take place, the soldiers were coming. You could see them. I've been there to Jerusalem. I've been there to the garden where Jesus was praying. And from that garden, you can see the gate out of which the soldiers would come. It's in the middle of the night, early morning, late night. And so they're carrying torches, and you could see the crowds coming when they were coming. So, and Jesus would have seen them coming many minutes before they got there. There was some distance they had to cross over the valley that they had to cross and then come up that to the garden there. Jesus saw them coming. Maybe he sees them during this prayer. Maybe at the end of the prayer, he tells the disciples, get up, they're coming. How do you think he felt? Knowing what was about to happen. From every perspective. Every relationship was about to be denied. I don't think it mattered that this was according to prophecy. I don't think it mattered that, I don't know how to explain what Jesus knew or didn't know as a human, as a man. I don't know how to explain how he was God before creation, and what knowledge did he have of that while he was a human. I don't know how to explain all of that. There's so much that's inexplainable, and I don't try to delve into it. But even if he did know from time eternal that it was going to happen, here it is. He's on the eve of it. I don't think that former knowledge, if it was there, made him feel any better. The New Testament seems to emphasize that Jesus' suffering, his suffering, was what we are, or is what we are called to be a part of. We're called to suffer, and Peter says it. We're called to suffer in like manner as him. And I suppose it's really a different subject. I'm chasing the rabbit here, but have you ever thought about why we're called to suffer like Christ? What was the suffering of Christ supposed to be for? Why was he called to suffer? He was being trained. He was being disciplined to be an obedient son, and he was successful. He became obedient. He did not give way to the suffering. He did not give in to the pressure and do whatever the pressure was trying to get him to do. He didn't deny that he was the Son of God when he was pressured to do so. It would have been easy for Jesus to have walked away from all of this, but he didn't. He didn't give in to the pressure. He stayed with it, and he suffered because of it. What is the purpose? What is the benefit of suffering? When we often, in studying the issue of the doctrine of evil, pain, and suffering, we consider the sources of suffering, the cause of it. We need to think about the reason for it and why we are called to it, why Jesus went through it, why we are called to that. But that's another subject, and I'm getting off base, and I apologize for that. Judas, was handpicked by Jesus, just like Peter, James, and John were. Judas was handpicked by Jesus as a follower. Jesus had befriended Judas there for 3 years. They lived together as family for 3 years. It was an intimate relationship. Those to whom Judas sold Jesus in the end were Jesus's worst enemies. These are the ones who had been tracking Jesus for a long time, looking for someone who would give them inroads to find a way to kill Jesus. But they have been stalking Jesus for a long time, trying to find a way to kill him. And Jesus knew that. And here Judas, his friend, his intimate friend, the person with whom he confided, one of the persons he had confided with for 3 years, he sells them not just to anybody, but to Jesus' worst enemies, those who hated him for who he claimed to be. They hated everything about Jesus. They were willing to violate every law in the books. They were willing to violate every conscience they had in order to put Jesus to death. And this is the people to whom Judas sold Jesus. Judas, his friend, his brother, sold him into their hands. And you need to feel that pain. You need to see why Jesus and David, but in prophecy, Jesus, or at least in fulfillment of the event, Jesus, how he moaned noisily, or why he not moaned noisily, why he's pacing the floor. Can you see him praying earnestly to God, looking for comfort and solace? You need to see that in this psalm. You need to see that there in the Bible. Verse 3, Psalm 55, verse 3, because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, the evildoer, for they bring down trouble upon me. The Hebrew more literally says, they cast iniquity upon me. And in wrath they hate me. They cherish, they love malice against me. The Old Jerusalem, the Orthodox Jewish Bible says, my heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness, and trembling have come upon me, and horror, shuddering, has overwhelmed me. David, and I think in prophecy, Jesus was restless. He was restless because the words of the enemy, who turns out to be his friend, the words of the enemy, they bring trouble upon me. Another translation says they cast iniquity upon me. The word trouble, the word cast iniquity is a metaphor, a Hebrew metaphor for the practice of rolling down a stone upon the enemy. This literally happened to David during the time of Absalom's revolt and Ahithophel's betrayal. It wasn't either one of them who did it, but it was during that time. If you look in 2 Samuel 16, now verse 5, now when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, former king of Israel, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, who coming from there, that is from that town. He came out cursing constantly as he came, and he rolled stones down at David and all the servants of the king, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. So now you are caught in your own evil because you are a bloodthirsty man. There wasn't, not everything Shimei said was untrue, and David realized that. If you read that context there, David says, no, don't bother him. They want to go shut him up, go put him to silence, so to speak. And David says, no, the Lord has caused him to say these things, and we're not going to go against the Lord. But that's another story as well. David was restless because of the words of his enemy. David was restless, pacing the floor because of the oppression of the wicked. The word oppression, they hemmed him in, they crushed him, they pressured him. He was restless because in anger or wrath, they persecuted him, they hated him. He was restless because of the terrors or the fear of death that had fallen upon him. If Absalom's rebellion is successful, David would surely die. It was the way of kings. When you come in and you take the throne, you put to death all the kings and all the royalty around you, so that of that king, so that they won't take the throne back. And so if Absalom becomes king, he's going to kill David, going to kill all his brothers. As Judas' betrayal was successful, Jesus died. It wasn't just the fear of death, it was death itself. Think of David's heart as he contemplates what his son has done and is doing, and what Ahithophel has done and is doing. It could be described no better or worse than fearfulness and trembling have come upon him. Horror has overwhelmed him. And if you're listening to this recording, I pray to God that nothing like this ever happens to you. No child of yours will ever bring this kind of pain to your heart. No intimate relationship of yours will ever bring this kind of pain to your heart. Is Jesus less offended at Judas's betrayal than David was at Absalom? Dare I ask how Jesus feels when it's me who has betrayed him? When it's me who has turned him over to the enemies? When it's me who has not been faithful to him? Psalm 55, verse 6. So I said, oh, that I had wings of the dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander off and remain in the wilderness. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. You ever felt like that? Have you ever had maybe you're not old enough to know what I mean, but have you ever had a Calgon moment that you wanted Calgon to take you away? Now, I've never had a Calgon moment. That's a woman's soap. But the idea is there. We're so pressured or so entrapped, we just want to get away. Maybe you want to go fishing. Maybe you want to go camping. Maybe you just want to get away and do nothing. That's what David said. I just want to go away. I just want to get out of this. I just want to go away to the mountains. Fly away to the mountains. Go out in the wilderness and just stay. Take me away on the wings of a dove. Most of us have had our hearts broken, and we expect this kind of trouble from our enemies. But again, try to understand the context of the psalm. This is not enemies. This is family. These are intimate friends. It doesn't make it any easier, I suppose, or this is not a nice thing, not a great thing that it's the enemy who betrays us, but this is not enemy. This is children, those with whom you have developed, or at least you felt you had developed the closest of relationships. The pain, the heartache is intensified many times over. It's in those times that we cry out, oh, that I could grow the wings of a dove and I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander off into the wilderness and remain. Unfortunately, there is no place, no physical place, no mountain so high and no forest so deep that we can hide from the pain of hearts broken by children or by close loved ones. We can see this in David. What about our Lord? Can we say that our Lord was trying to escape, to fly away? If the Lord had found the wings of a dove or a wilderness into which to escape, would he have done so? It was our Lord who knelt in blood and tears there in Gethsemane and cried, Father, if it's your will, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. But initially he says, let me grow the wings of the dove. Let me fly away. If it's your will, let this cup pass from me. He wanted to fly away like the dove. The suffering through which he was about to go, which was causing so much anguish in his heart at this very moment, he was asking for another way. Is there another way? But in the end, there were no wings. There was no other way. There was no mountain hiding place, no wilderness to escape. In fact, neither David nor Jesus pursued their destiny. Both with anguish and pain stayed the course, though they had wished there was another way. Verse 9. A change of pace, you might say, a change of approach. Destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around on its walls, and iniquity and trouble are also in the midst of it. Destruction is in the midst of depression, and deceit do not depart from its streets. Some people think because of this particular passage here that either this is inserted by another author or David did not write. David would not say these kinds of things about Jerusalem. But it seems that Jerusalem was in this kind of way, and it was partially David's fault. David had abdicated somewhat his responsibilities. He had gone away from his responsibilities. There were cases that were not being judged, and Absalom was stealing the hearts of the people, offering false judgment, bad judgments. What does it mean to divide their tongues? It says, "O Lord, divide their tongues, destroy and divide their tongues." Reminds me of, I'm sure it does you, the tongues, the dividing of the tongues at Babel that God did, or Babel that God did. Why did he do that? Well, to stop their plans. Their plans were destroyed when the languages were confused. David's asking for something akin to that here. And the account in 2 Samuel, it says in verse 31, chapter 15, verse 31, he says, "Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." And if you go to the story there in 2 Samuel 17, you'll find that God answered that prayer in a positive way, or at least in a way that was giving David what he asked for. Ahithophel had sought to betray David and advise Absalom. Absalom, however, on one particular occasion, he did take Ahithophel's advice on occasion, but on this particular occasion, when it talked about going to war with David, Absalom sought, not Absalom, but Absalom sought a second opinion, and he asked David's true friend, who was feigning to be a betrayer of David. His name was Hushai the Archite, and Hushai stayed true to David and gave Absalom bad advice under the guise that it was good advice. And the advice sounded so good, actually, that Absalom took Hushai's advice and not Ahithophel's. And in that sense, Ahithophel's words were turned to foolishness. And Ahithophel understood that his advice or counsel had been rejected or not taken by Absalom. I guess he saw what was coming from the future, or he understood how the future was going to play out there. And so he went and hanged himself, went home and set his house in order, the Bible says, and he hanged himself. Notice going back to that David's assessment of Jerusalem, he seemed to go into great detail to tell us the city's condition. He says it was full of violence and strife and iniquity and trouble or mischief and destruction or wickedness and oppression and deceit. As an illustration of just how wicked the city became during Absalom's coup, one of the advices that Ahithophel gave Absalom says you will be able to gather the people to you when they realize that you are the cock of the walk, when they realize that you are the bull of the woods, so to speak. Go up there in the midst of the people on David's house and take his concubines and go in unto them openly so that all Israel will see Absalom is the one. And Absalom took that advice. 2,000 years later, during the time of Jesus, as Jesus surveyed Jerusalem and its leadership, what do you think Israel's leadership was like? Jerusalem's leadership was like? What kind of men were ruling Jerusalem during that time? What do you think about it? These are the kind of men who claim to believe in God, but they knowingly crucified an innocent man, a man who had proved before their very eyes his claim that he is the Son of God. He didn't just say, I'm the Son of God. He proved it by the many wonderful works they did. They saw the miracles. They could not deny the miracles. They tried to find people who would lie about the miracles. They asked on the day of his crucifixion, when Pilate would offer them a prisoner on the day of the high feast, Pilate, it was his tradition to give them back a prisoner, free a prisoner. And so he asked them, which one do you want? He picked the worst one of the bunch, Barabbas. You want him, murderer, thief, rabble? You want this guy to be freed, or this guy who goes around doing good? Give us Barabbas. Crucify Jesus. That's the kind of leadership that Jesus sees. They plotted against him continually, even, as I said, hiring liars that they might have means and method and reason to kill Jesus. The pressure of evil was so great that none of Jesus' devoted followers were able to stand up to it. That's how wicked the city was. Surely, violence and strife and iniquity and trouble and destruction and oppression and deceit. Appropriate descriptions of Jerusalem, both in David's time and in Jesus. No less is it true today of our society. I'm not talking about Jerusalem anymore. We may be. I hadn't been there in a long time. Don't know how it is there in this sense. What about our society? Have we not as a society run amok trying to destroy the cause of Christ? I can't stand to watch the news in the morning because the newscasters have such a hatred for everything that's good, everything that's decent. We live in a society where men who can call themselves a woman, and any who deny that fact and refer to that man as a woman, well, they're considered unlawful and bigoted and haters. And we live in a society where perversion is called good and good is called perversion. Recently, you might have seen in the news, couldn't help but that the current vice president of our country was castigated because he felt it prudent to have his wife with him while entertaining female guests. Well, I wouldn't think of doing anything different. But he considered, oh, you must think you're God's gift to women because you think you have to have your wife's supervision when you're with other women. Anyway, I'm not politically inclined, but I saw that and it just You might remember another recent president, well, he's not so recent anymore, I guess, who was eventually lauded as a hero when it came to light that he had sexual relations with an employee. Evil called good, good called evil. We live in a society where hundreds of thousands are slain in doctors' offices on a yearly basis. For 38 years running, 1975 to 2012, over 1 million a year were killed. Sometimes close to 1 million, or over 1.5 million babies killed, slain in the mother's womb. For the last 5 years, it's been slightly under that, and then thankfully, even though it's just under 1 million babies a year now being killed, it is in decline. For that, I'm grateful. In our country, nursing homes have become places of violence rather than of tender care. Child abuse it's regularly seen in our country in the most horrible of ways. Things happen to children that I could not imagine could happen to children. And I know this because I'm familiar with some of the DFACS cases here in our state, and I can't convey any of that information, but things happen to children that you could not possibly conceive could happen to children by their own parents. Biological sperm donors and egg donors. Parent is really a misnomer. Human trafficking has become a multi-billion-dollar industry in our country. 1.5 million persons are trafficked through America alone. I think the numbers are in the 20 millions of people who are trafficked in the world, and we're becoming big in that. They say that half of the trafficked people are children, and a fourth of the trafficked people are sexually exploited. Violence, strife, iniquity, trouble, destruction, oppression, deceit. All unfortunate, valid descriptions of our society. And David saw it in Jerusalem. He prays for God to see this, for God to destroy and divide the tongue of these people who have brought on this violence. In the next verse, he says in verse 12, "For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from him. But it was you." Seems like he's gone from addressing God in his song. Now he's speaking directly to Ahithophel, maybe directly to Absalom, maybe directly to both. It was you, a man my equal, my companion, my acquaintance, who took sweet counsel together and walked with me walked to the house of God in the throne. He pauses in his prayer. He all but names his betrayer. He doesn't name names, but anybody who knew the situation at the time, all those who sang this song, Ahithophel was going through their mind. Maybe Absalom and Ahithophel were going through their mind. Ahithophel, he was the grandfather of Bathsheba. He was a true friend to David who turned against him. Where was it? Maybe for years, we don't know. Maybe for years he feigned friendship. He worked his way into the confidence of David, hoping one day to find the opportunity to avenge David or Bathsheba and Uriah for what David did. I don't know the answer to that question. Was he a true friend and he forsook, or was he never a true friend and he was just conniving all along? You know, if he had that kind of heart, I don't think it happened overnight. I don't think he woke up one day and I think, I'll go give Absalom a chance. Whatever it was, David perceived that the relationship, David's perception of the relationship that was there was, it was a strong, intimate relationship. And the fact that it was Ahithophel that did it sort of capped off or caused David's cup of suffering to overflow. He uses three very strong words in verse 13. He says, "This, my friend, is my equal." It'd be very much like in the Hebrew way of saying it. It'd be very much like our phrase, our modern phrase, "He's my soulmate." He uses the word companion. The Hebrew indicates here someone I know. I have learned him. He's someone that I know him inside and out. He knows me inside and out. And the word acquaintance, the English here does not even come close to doing justice to this word. It's so strong. The word acquaintance, translated acquaintance here, it's so strong it can be used to describe the husband and wife relationship. In fact, it was used to describe the husband and wife relationship of David, Adam and Eve. I'm not saying that David was intimate with Ahithophel like that, but the love, the knowledge, the acquaintance there is so strong it can be described like that or with that word. With these kinds of descriptions, this is how David felt in his heart about the relationship that was there. You can imagine the pain when he was betrayed. But do you think, bringing it up to the time of Jesus, do you think the pain of Jesus was any less? You think about concerning the disciples. Jesus, the night of his death, before the betrayal took place, he washed the feet of the disciples. He didn't skip Jesus. He knew. He knew the time was coming. He knew that Judas would eat at the same table, dip in the same bowl with him. You know, the people who are, I think I may have told you, I lived in Russia for 2 years, and there was a children's home there in Russia, and my wife and I, and many helpers who we had here on this side of America, we shipped over a humanitarian aid shipment, a train, one of those big metal boxes, crates, not crate, whatever it is, full of food and clothes, not only for the children's home, but for the church. But we talked to the children's home before we did it and said, we need to use your address as a place to which we can ship that, and if you'll let us do that, we'll give you half of what's give you for your distribution in the children's home, half what's in the crate. Not crate, what is it, those things called? What are those things called? Anyway, almost the size of a train car. There's a word, but it's still in my mind right now. When you get old, you draw blanks. I'm drawing one right now over a simple matter and losing my thought. We brought the food there, brought the things there, and the director of the children's home, she wanted to, while we were working hard, getting everything unloaded, unpacked, and all that, she wanted to feed us, and so she had her cook bring out a huge bowl of potatoes, mashed potatoes, and we were all going to eat from this huge bowl. We're going to sit down in communion, I suppose, and eat from this huge bowl. Us, my family and I, the workers that were helping us, the children who had been out dirty. It was just, she gave us spoons and she stuck them in the potatoes. And I tell you what, I was quick to get in and out. I had my little section of potatoes, that I was going to eat from. And when folks started getting close to that section, I was done. I was full. I was still hungry, but I was full. I was done. Had all I wanted. But with Jesus and in the Jewish way of doing things, not only Jewish, the Eastern way of doing things, when you eat with somebody, when you eat close with somebody, when you dip in the same pot, sit at the same table, that's your close friend. That's intimate. And it's true. You don't want to drink out of the glass of somebody that you don't know. But you'll drink out of one with your wife, or you'll drink out of one with maybe your children. Jesus was eating with Judas. Judas, his heart had already been filled by Satan. I don't know how long Jesus knew Judas would betray him. Some people say he knew it all along, knew it when he chose him. I don't know. John chapter 6 is the first record that we have that Jesus knew that there was a betrayer among them, and likely knew that it was Judas. But did Jesus know it when he chose Judas? Was there a relationship that Judas and Jesus had before that time that was, this is my dear friend. This is one I want to devote my life to train him, to teach him. Was Judas the friend of Jesus, the brother of Jesus, the companion of Jesus, the acquaintance of Jesus? Did God want Jesus to know that pain as well of losing a friend like that? Was Jesus, as we think about it from that perspective, was he in all points tempted like as we are? Verse 15, let death seize them. Woo! He changes his tone again. Let death seize them. Let them go down to hell alive. Not just go to hell, but go to hell alive. For the wickedness in their dwellings and among them. See that one coming? Did you know the psalm beforehand? Did you read this for the first time? Did you see that one coming? Did he just pray to God that David's enemies, his ex-friend, would go to hell? Well, sort of. Can't make too much of that in one sense, because the word hell is probably better translated as the grave, but it doesn't make it a whole lot better. May you go to the grave alive. There's actually precedent for that in the book of Numbers, in the story of Korah. In Numbers 16, it says, so the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from Korah, get away from Dothan, get away from Abram. Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abram, and the elders followed him, and he spoke to the congregation, said, depart now from the tents of these wicked men, touch nothing there, lest you be consumed in their sins. So they got away from around the tents of the Korah, Dathan, and Abram, and Dathan and Abram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives and their sons and little children, and Moses said, by this you shall know the Lord has sent me to do all these works. That was the question they had. Does Moses have the right to lead? And Korah was trying to say, no, he don't. I want to do it. For I have not done these things of my own will. If these men, this is the sign, if these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them and all their belongings, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, the ground opened up and split asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their household and all the men of Korah and the men of Korah and their goods. So David has a precedent where he can say, may these enemies of mine who have betrayed me, may the earth swallow them up alive. And they go to the place of the dead alive. It's no small thing that David asked his own son. Drop dead in his tracks. Maybe he doesn't have Absalom in his mind. Maybe it's only Ahithophel. But if Ahithophel's in his mind, Absalom can't be far away, because Ahithophel was betraying him to Absalom. When it came right down to it, when the battle was being decided, David asked the general to spare his son Absalom. But in the end, neither Absalom nor Ahithophel was spared, and neither one of them actually died what you might call a natural death. One hanged himself, and the other had a spear thrust through him as he was hanging from the tree, being caught in his head, caught by his head. If we apply this prophetically to Jesus, if we speak of the betrayers of being more than just Judas, who also hanged himself, and include the rulers of Israel, we'll find that they too did not die natural deaths. If you go a few years into the future of Jesus' death, they all died there in Jerusalem at the hands of the Romans, or sometimes some of them at the hands of them themselves as they killed each other. And if you read the historical event from Josephus and others, but mainly Josephus, of the record of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, it was a horrible, horrible thing that took place. Not only in Jerusalem, but in other cities. You go out to Masada and see the things that took place just so that the Romans wouldn't get their hands on them. The description that was given that the mothers would eat their own children. Nothing natural about that. Jesus did not pray that, as far as we know, that such a thing would happen to his enemies. In fact, he prayed that God would forgive them. They don't know what they do, but he did foretell their deaths in Matthew 24. Verse 16 of Psalm 55. As for me, I will call upon Elohim, God, and Jehovah will save me. The Lord will save me. Evening and morning and noon I will pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. He has redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was against me, for there were many against me. God will hear and afflict them, even he who abides from old, because they do not change, they do not fear God. What words would you use to describe how David felt about God's ability to deliver him? It seems to me David has great confidence in God. He has seen what his friends will do. He has seen what those with whom he has been intimate in relationship will do. But he says, my God, not like it. I will call upon him. I will cry out to him. He will save me. In 2 Samuel 7, verse 13, God said, promised to David, he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chastise him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men, but mercy shall not depart from him as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. It was these very words that the New Testament uses to refer to the sure mercies of David, to which we can cling as our confidence. Just as God's mercies came to David, God's mercies will come to us. That's the promise, if you please, the essence of the book of Revelation. There's no promise of life without struggle or persecution. In fact, quite the opposite is promised, but there is promise of ultimate victory and eternal life and ultimate peace. There are two kinds, at least, of evil in this world, two that we'll consider here. There are the evil ones who do evil, but they don't know that what they're doing is evil. They may not know or may understand that this is not the great thing, but they don't see it as evil, as assigning themselves and designating themselves to darkness. They're just doing what they know to do. Given time, given opportunity, given the right message at the right time, they could likely repent. And Jesus cried for such from the cross. But then there are evil, or is evil that is done intentionally. People who intentionally deny God, they curse God, and they hate God. They hate everything that has to do with God. They disdain all efforts of godliness. For them, I think Jesus specifically said, I do not pray. In John 17, verse 9. John in 1 John 5, verse 16 says, don't pray for that. Jesus teaches us in the Sermon on the Mount, don't cast your pearls before swine or dogs. They'll turn and rend you. For some people, there is no help because they continually and wantonly disregard and disdain all efforts to help. They don't want help. They don't want to be perceived as needing help. Verse 20, he has put forth his hands against those who were at peace with him. He has broken his covenant. The words of his mouth are smoother than butter, but war is in his heart. His words are softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved, but you, O God, shall bring them down to the pit of destruction. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men shall not live half the days of their lives, or live out the days of their lives. The days of half their lives. Bloodthirsty, I'll get it right in a minute, and deceitful men shall not live out half their days. But I will trust in you. As I read this last comment, I see Absalom more than I see Ahithophel, mostly because that's how Absalom was described. He was stinging the hearts of the people there in 2 Samuel 15. He was described as being smoother than silk, so to speak. And, people bowed down to him. Anyway, regardless of how strong or buttery, you might say, were the lies of David's enemy, David leaves us with the assurance God's going to take care of that. And I put my trust in God. I think we can find here a teaching that is emphasized by both Christ and Paul and Peter as well. That it's God who will judge. It's God who will punish. It's not your responsibility to take vengeance into your own hands. It's vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, he says in the book of Romans. Psalm 55. How would you describe this psalm? What kind of psalm would you say it is? A psalm of praise? Got that. A psalm of my mind's blank again. It's an imprecatory psalm. One of the psalms where David calls down the wrath of God upon David's enemies. He pursued God's enemies. Hope this study has been helpful to you. God bless. See you next time.